Okay, so we're on day 3 of the blended learning. So today we're going to talk about hub pilot, stud pilot, and demountable. Okay, so just really quickly, Albert, where are you at with all this learning so far?
I'm caught up.
Nice, good. Everyone's done their self-paced then on the hub, stud, demountable. Good, awesome. Okay. Any more questions from yesterday at all? Yeah, go ahead, Keaton.
We don't. Sorry, I don't think we really touched on that car haulers, but where are the lifting points on those?
Yeah, so sometimes on a car hauler, you're lifting by, it can be different a lot of times. So the main thing is you got to find proper suitable jacking points, okay? So obviously you can't get to the axle all the time, right? So very often what we'll do, and you'll see it, is we're very close to the wheel position. We'll end up lifting the frame up. This can be the same on a tilt deck because you can't actually get the tires off sometimes without lifting the body up, right? The thing is, the weight really increases because now you're not pushing the suspension up. So it can feel like extra super heavy, right? So if you would lift it up by the, from the frame or by the body, you'd throw your, maybe a low profile rolling jack under there, lift it up. You still need to support it with a stand. So the suspension could hang from there. Best scenario, you'd get a stand under the axle after it's lifted, if you can safely get in there. And then put cribbing under that frame or body. But generally on car haulers, we're not able to go underneath them. Does that make sense? It's probably familiar with what you do. You lift it on the side.
Since I've been on the commercial side, I've only seen one come in, but like when he rolled in, it was maybe 3 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
So there was no way we were getting any kind of jack under it.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be pretty low, right? But even in between, so in between the duals, right, there's this like piece of suspension comes down into like it's almost like a triangle, and you can also lift there, but that will lift the whole side of the trailer, and the suspension will hang, and then you can put your stand in, and you can put cribbing again underneath it to keep it from coming down.
Okay, perfect.
Lauren, I have a question about lifting trailers. You're not supposed to lift a trailer up, so it's just on its front support stands.
Yeah.
Does a, what are they called? Like a trailer jack stand, that front stand, change that at all?
That's just for loading, right? So there's no like I can't say. There's no documentation anywhere on that's a thing.
Okay.
And how that weight transfers. Those stands are made for driving a forklift in and out. Right?
Okay.
So I don't know how that's a different weight shift, right? Because that's on top of it. Not
totally
like
to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Best practice if you had one would obviously to put it in there, but yeah, we're supposed to. The industry is leave one axle on the ground.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so by the end of this course, you'll be able to determine acceptable solutions to common challenges that team members face when performing a hub pilot, stud pilot, and demountable rim service. So we're going to go what's common between all hub types. We're going to talk about that a bit. Hub pilot, service, stud, demountable, and then we'll summarize at the end. So day 3, so that's what we got left in the gray. We'll do all the orange there today. Okay, so again, I'm not going to ask in the chat because it's not a function for everybody. So let's start with Darian. Which photo is of a demountable rim?
Number 2.
Yeah, good. Steve, what do you see on photo number 2? Like, how would you understand that's a demountable rim? What does it have? What other systems don't?
Has wedges holding the rim onto the wheel surface.
Yep, good, right? And yeah, and usually it's like 1.25 inch socket size, right? So you got the clamp or wedge right there. You got the clamp or wedge right there. You got the nut on there. Remember, this is your cast spoke wheel with these 5 spokes here. Could be 6 spokes, and then your rim is this right here. So they're separate pieces as well. Good, Keegan. Which photo is of a stud pilot?
That'd be number 4.
Okay, is there any other ones?
Possibly number 3. I'm kind of unfamiliar with that picture.
Yeah, 3 or 4. So this is these are cap nuts. So they have an inner cap nut holding the inside wheel on, and they have an outer cap nut holding the outside wheel on. So it's twice the torquing, twice the gunning. So yeah, what else about them? So do you remember Dennis from the video at all? What's different about these wheels versus maybe a different kind of system?
The cap nuts could be different from one another, I would say.
So the cap nuts, they're left-hand thread on the driver's side.
On the left.
Yeah, left side, and right-hand thread on the passenger side. They have ball seats, right? Where a hub pilot would not. A hub pilot would have a straight through hole drilled. Okay, and they're centered by the studs, hence the stud pilot name. Okay.
Also, there's something along the lines of like an aluminum wheel as well, versus like a steel wheel on the inner and outer?
We'll get into that later on. There will be a slide on that one. Yeah, so nuts have ball seat. There's no flange like a hub pilot has, and the direction. So last but not least, let's go with Albert. Hub pilot system is what number?
1.
Yeah, so Albert, how would you know if it pulled up? What would tell you it's a hub pilot right away?
The lack of the square head on the wheel nuts, they're flat on the bolt holes instead of beveled, things like that.
Yep, and this collar here, right?
Oh yeah, the wheel.
Right, so we have this nut, and then we have the collar there, which is just flat against the rim. Also, what you'll see is, remember, they're hub piloted. So this pilot pad right there is what the system centers on the hub by. Okay, where on this stud pilot system, it doesn't actually touch those. It centers on the ball seats and the studs. Any questions with that? Just a little bit of review from the self-paced. Okay, so Devin, this photo is an outer dual that has lost air and is not seated on the flange. So this unit came onto the chuck pad just like this. Can you explain what would I do with this?
You need to remove it and inspect the tire so you can air it out.
Okay. So do you remember on the self-pace about the inside tire?
Oh, yeah. So you need to, because it's below 80% of the operating pressure, you need to fully deflate the inner tire as well.
Right. So let's just talk about this just a little bit. If this tire was overloaded, okay, which would be the case. So let's just say it drove from Sault Ste. Marie to Edmonton with a load on it, okay? So obviously the inside tire's carrying the whole load the whole way, okay? So there's potential that it has been overloaded and damaged, okay? So think about it this way: an underinflated tire or an overloaded tire, the same thing's happening to the sidewall, okay? The cords are getting potentially damaged, okay? But if it came from Sault Ste. Marie to Edmonton, empty, no load, that tire would not have been overinflated or overloaded on the inside. So a bit of homework would have to be done, right? Maybe some questions to the driver, right? Although we don't want to believe everything they say, because if they know our systems, they might just say the right thing so they can get the job done faster, right? But before we ever take any nuts off, we need to check the air pressures. Said that in the self-paced on a dual assembly. We're going to check the air pressures, determine where they're at. We really need to inspect the inner and outer dual. The worst thing is if we just grab the impact gun, yank that outside tire on, we're like, holy crap, there's a bulge there, or holy crap, the sidewall's split open. Like, that's a bad thing. Okay, so we want to make sure we do that really good quality inspection. Ask some questions before we just blindly remove them and potentially are holding a tire that's ready to rupture. Okay. So inspect the inner tire for damage. Ensure to deflate both assemblies. Remove both duals and complete risk procedure. So that's the other thing, right? So if this is our assembly, what comes into the truck pad like this, in our CalTire world, we are actually charging the customer that we're taking the inside off as well. Because what can happen is if we just take the outer off, a bunch of debris might fall in behind the on the mating surface, and we might have a wheel off. So we need to remove that, clean it, put it back on. The other thing is we don't know who was the last. Maybe it was a CalTire store, maybe not, but we don't know who worked on it the time before. So we really got to make sure, because we're responsible being the last ones to work with it. It doesn't matter who before us took the inner off or anything and what they did to it. If it came off because of anything to do with the inner having debris on the mating surface, it's our responsibility. So we all love torque indicators, right? Especially the white ones on the bottom. Has everyone worked on those? Yeah, like the worst. So here's a couple options anyway. So option number one, easy to use, fits over top of the nut, must face all in the same direction. So there's not really they could all point in, they could all point to the left, they could all point to the right. The point is, Steve, what's the point of these indicators?
Just so if a lug nut does come kind of loose, you'll notice that it's pointing a different direction than it's supposed to be.
Simple as that. Yep, good job. Truck driver, they're doing their walk around and whoa, one of those is different. You know, we should go to CalTire or call for a closer look at that. So yeah, option number one. Option number two, it's a pretty junky video, but I'm going to play it. So basically, if you haven't seen these, it's just a really quick tutorial on how to remove and how to put them on.
Let's see how long it takes.
I'm just going to mute it because it's so bad. So often what people will do is they'll spray those with WD-40 or a penetrating oil first, so they'll slide on easier. Like after you've torqued it, obviously. And they interlock. These are, if I had to pick a least favorite, these are my least favorite. Remember this though, this is not part of the changeover, okay? Or the on-off, the rotator, whatever. And here's he's taking them off. So it's really important that we validate our time. Okay, like in our computers, there's codes. So it's like an extra code for that. Okay, so a torque indicator, there's a labor code. It costs the customer money. If they want to have those, then we have to spend our time taking them on and off. Make sure you write that on the work order. Okay, it's important that if a job's supposed to take 30 minutes and it takes us 45, we need to validate why it took longer, right? And we should write that down. I use an example of like any of this stuff. So if I called a plumber right now and said, hey, the key's under my mat, can you go to my house, replace the hot water tank? Just one sec on yours. So I would expect to get a bill from the plumber saying I had to spend 20 minutes moving this, that, and the other thing to get to your hot water tank, right? I would expect that. So customers can expect when they have torque indicators, when they have central air inflation systems. If we go to clean a dual off and it's so rusty it takes us longer time to do it, we need to write that down, okay, so we can charge the customer accordingly. Go ahead, Steve, if that was your question.
I was just wondering, so is it just that style, or is it also number one that would have to?
Yeah, any of them, any torque indicators. Yeah, it's extra labor for us, so we should write that down. Okay, so let's just look at this here. So really quickly here, the purpose of a skid indicator. So you've all seen these before, these yellow stiff little pieces of plastic sticking out. So basically, if you don't know, it's just when the driver looks out their mirror, they can tell if their wheels are turning, so they don't just drive away and this top picture happens to their tires. Okay, so the only purpose of them is that the driver can see what they're doing. They're held on by one nut, so there's some studs sticking out usually after the wheel nut, and then this little nut goes on there and holds it. There's no torque spec, they're just snug on there. So here's a little video of, this is the most basic central inflation system out there. So I'm just gonna play this little video. This is a trainer from Edmonton, actually. He had some time last year to film a bunch of videos, so here we go.
Central tire
Is there sound? Good.
inflation removal and installation. Ensure you identify the hoses. So you have an inside hose and an outside hose. Using tire chalk or a paint stick, put an I and an O on the center cap. This way you'll know that your inside stem is here and your outside stem needs to be here. Using a pair of pliers, gently remove the hoses from the center hub. Once the nuts are removed, simply pull the hoses out of the center hub. Now that the hoses are removed from the center hub, you may now remove all of the wheel fasteners. Once the tires are removed from the hub, you can remove the hose from the valve stem. With the wheels reinstalled onto the unit, attach the hoses back into the center hub, thread the cap nut back into place, with the hoses threaded back in place, take your pliers and just gently tighten down the hoses into the center hub. Remember, these don't need to be put on super tight. Just gently, snug. And the system has now been reinstalled.
Have you all worked on those at some point so far? Yeah, pretty common, right? That's the easiest type, really, but again, there's the same code for all of them, so make sure you write that. If you got to do that, it's extra labor, so we got to write that down. So as you can see, he didn't take the duals right off, but what he was saying was you would take, obviously he undid these first, he marked where they should go. You don't have to do that, but it's a good reminder. And then once you would take the duals off, you would remove them from the valve stem. Okay, so this will be another chat one, but I'm just gonna have to grab somebody here. So let's go with Devin. So we're going to identify the correct hammers or mallets for removing seized wheels from the hub. Okay. So which are the approved style hammers that are used when the wheel is seized on the hub?
I think 1, 2, and 4, so long as they're not a hard or metal faced hammer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Totally. So it needs to be a dead blow hammer. Okay, so again, this isn't Cal Tire stuff. This is from the industry, which is the manufacturer who made the rim. Okay, the rim manufacturer says, do not hit my my rim or my wheel with a hard face steel hammer. That's what they say. Okay, so that's what the standard comes from. And I always say, like, if something came in with paint, it should leave with paint. That's how we should be treating something, right? It shouldn't be dented, shouldn't all these things. So it can be a metal hammer, but a dead blow metal hammer would have like a brass head, so it's softer than the metal that you're hitting. Okay, but generally in our stores we'll have this big dead blow, this number 1. I'm sure you all have one like that in your locations. Other than that, these are weighted rubber mallets. They work pretty good. They'd be a bit small if it's really seized. Then if we go to this slide here, just an example of how we might, where we might be striking the backside of the rim if it's seized on there. Looks familiar? That's our favorite part of the day. Okay, so basically, I'm just going to go over this really quickly. I'm not sure if you've used any of these things yet. In photo number 1, there's 3 items here. So what you see up top here is a ram like this connected to a hydraulic pump like this. Really common in the stores. Most stores have them for sure, especially if you're doing OTR service, because we use them for OTR service in crane trucks all the time. But basically, you would put this ram against the rim flange and against the frame. You'd still have a couple wheel nuts, just a few threads on. So if there's a lot of pressure, all of a sudden that rim pops, that outer dual's not going to fall on the ground. Okay, just held on there. So yeah, you'd step on the pump, separates it a little bit. You'd move this ram to a different part, 180 from where you started. Working on that side, back and forth until it pops off. Anyone use that before? Yeah, okay. Pretty handy. Something out there now is and this PB blaster. So we should always, if we know something's going to be seized, just spray it with penetrating oil right away, right when it drives in there. Just give it a spray, let that work a little bit. Number 2, this is a tool made by Ken Tool. So basically, it's a flat bag. It's an airbag. It hardly weighs anything. It's pretty cool. It goes to about 125 psi. Puts out like I think it's 2,000 or 3,000 pounds of force when inflated. So it can go in between the duals like this. Sometimes you need cribbing because it's only so it only inflates so far. So what I'll use often is like those jacking pads that we talked about. We said they're $100 each. You can put one on each side and inflate the bag, and it works really good to pop the dual. This is a game changer, especially on those 19.5s that we all, maybe it's a CN or a CP unit, but they're totally stuck on the hub all the time. So it's called the shark fin. And if you're going to use it on the back, you can use it, you put in between the frame and the flange again, but you often need cribbing to make it wide enough for it to come off. But it's pretty good. Doesn't weigh anything, so you're not so awkwardly when you're by yourself, like if you're using this ram trying to hold everything in place. So if you want one, just go on to So you go on to Ken Tool's website and look up the shark fin. I think attached there's like a YouTube video for it, and show your manager, maybe they'll buy you a shark fin like that. Potentially keeps you out of a lot of, like you're not smashing your knuckles, right? You're not hurting your shoulder swinging an axe or a hammer underneath the trailer, you know, things like that. Okay, so just to clarify a little bit of the self-pace. So in the self-pace, it's stated that you must always have the valve stem opposite or 180 of one another. But the reality is this isn't always possible. So Dennis, which the top or the bottom of the line cannot have the valve stem opposite each other? So which group of wheel rim assemblies? Yeah, how come?
Because it's not an even amount of like handholds or gaps between the spoke.
Yeah, and that's it, right? So this is a 5-spoke rim. So you have your one valve stem right there. So one would have to be here or here. So we're trying to make them across as best as we can. And this one here, this is a 5, remember we called these handholds. So if the valve slot, you can see the hole right there. Hopefully you can. You can see the hole right here. So if that was on the inside dual, the outer dual stem would have to either be in this hole or this hole. Okay. Just to clarify. And then this is a 6-hole. So obviously you could have a stem right here or a 6-spoke. You have a stem here, stem here, stem here, stem here, opposite each other. And this is a 10-hole. So you could have a stem opposite each other here. Okay, any questions out there about just hub types, similarities, differences? Good, okay. So let's get into hub pilot service a little bit. So if we're looking at a hub pilot nut, this is what it would look like, right? We have the collar, we have the nut. Sometimes there's studs sticking out, sometimes not. We'll get into that. So a few things here. So let me zoom in again. So let's just focus on the area of this pilot pad. Oops, maybe I can't do that. Okay, so this is the pilot pad right here. Okay, so the minimum requirement, the pilot pad right here must be halfway through the outermost wheel. Okay, so this is the inside wheel. This is the outside wheel in this pilot pad. This is a line in between. So this is the outer wheel dimension right there. So this pilot pad is halfway through or more. Okay, minimum of halfway because it needs to support it on the hub. And when this comes into play is maybe a customer is like, hey, I want to take my aluminums or my steels off and put aluminums on. Well, if the hub wasn't designed for aluminum rims, it may not actually work. Okay, so we got to pay attention to that. If we're looking at the stud, so just to clarify this part a little bit, the stud needs to come out of the nut or flush. Okay, all the threads of the nut have to be used. Okay, that's the industry standard. So you can't have the stud back set into the nut. All of the threads of the nut have to be used. Okay, this one down here is off a steering axle. So again, this pilot pad would have to be the minimum of halfway through the steering wheel here. Thumbs up, that makes sense? Okay. So a bit of damage here, just to kind of clarify what the self-paced modules was saying. So photo number 1, you can see right here, this shiny part of the stud is displaying flattened out threads. They should be replaced, okay? Photo number 2 is showing a broken stud. You can see it broken off there. We'll complete the tire service, but recommend them to replace the nut, okay? So you can see that there. So do you remember in the self-paced, Steve, if you have one broken stud like this, what's the recommendation on repairing that unit?
Is it 3? You
Yeah,
gotta
good.
go through this.
Yeah, nailed it. So the manufacturer of the stud says, hey, if my stud's broken, these ones have been like over used and they should be replaced too. And if 2 or more are broken, all 10 are supposed to be replaced. Okay, not a Cal Tire thing. That's the stud manufacturer, nut manufacturer. They come up with that industry standard. Okay. So the question is, like, can we hold this vehicle hostage? We can't do that at Cal Tire, right? But what's so important is we got to write good notes on a work order. Okay, like maybe you get a mobile mechanic to come to your store. Maybe that's a thing. We used to do that all the time when I managed a store in Hope. There was a local mechanic who'd just come and do it on our truck pad. But if the driver's like, hey, I'm gonna go, there's a shop across the street, I just need to drive there, they'll fix it. Okay, so write down the work order: notified customer, broken stud, right? And make sure your counter team member writes that down. And this sounds funny. If I was thinking, like, if my counter team member isn't very good with details and writing that info down, honestly, I'd take a picture of that work order and just keep it on myself. Right? Like I told you, you didn't write it down. It's not coming back to me. Right? In this case here, you can see these studs. So when you're doing an inspection of wheel studs, you're looking for diameter, right? You can see how the threads are actually gone here. And this part of the stud, the threads are flattened. They should be nice and sharp. Okay, so on your visual, that's what you're looking for. Again, we want to have this customer repair these. It's pretty urgent. Okay, so in this case, what I would do is, if the customer's like, no, I'm just going to bring it across the road, I would make sure that we call, like, obviously there's notes on the work order, but I would call who the customer works for and say, hey, like, thing's unsafe. We made notes on the work order. He needs to get this fixed before he travels. Okay, we need to do our due diligence like that to make sure. Not just he's safe, but we don't want to wheel off and someone else is in trouble for that. Okay, and we can help them sometimes by arranging that mobile mechanic to come to our location to repair that for them. Okay, so let's go with Albert. We see some oil here, okay, on the displaying some drips of oil. What is the purpose of using oil, like you see in the photos?
To prevent seizing on the hub pilot, adding a drop there, to lubricate the collar of the wheel nut and the stud to create proper torque.
Proper torque, or what's the other word?
Clamping force.
Okay, yeah, so remember, torque's just the turning of the nut. Okay, so just to explain this simply, when there's the oil on the nut and the stud, it takes longer for the wrench to reach 475. Okay, so it increases the clamping force. Okay, so if it's dry, the wrench, no matter what's going to stop at 475, right? But if it's dry, there's more friction, so it stops at 475, and you get whatever number of clamping force you get. But when you add oil like this, the nut, because of the viscosity, it takes longer for the wrench to torque at 475. So then you achieve the proper clamping force. For an example, these numbers are really close to being accurate. I might be off a little bit, but to hold the assemblies on a unit and not to come off, you need 32,000 pounds of 28,000 pounds of clamping force. If all the components are dry, it's 32,000 pounds of clamping force. With just the oil on the stud and the nut and the pilot pad, now we're going to achieve that proper clamping force, which is up around 56,000 pounds. of clamping force. Okay, so that's huge, right? And that's how we're ensuring. Yeah, Albert.
In the video, it said only to use an approved weight oil to lubricate the studs and the hub pilot. I've seen guys use copper coat on the hub pilot. That's acceptable.
Yeah, so on the hub pilot, that's acceptable for sure, right? There for sure can't be anything of any kind of lubrication in between duals. So if that copper coat's getting put on, it has to be such a thin film that it's not going to get bunched up behind the duals when you're installing them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's never used on the stud though, right?
Yep, it can't be on the stud.
Yeah.
So specifically on the stud and nut, it has to be a 30 weight oil, a motor oil. So it could be a straight 30, a 1030, or a 530. Okay, it should be brand new oil. So don't be using used crappy oil. It's not actually healthy for you to be touching, right? There's lots of crap in it from being used in a vehicle. And it looks bad. Like the customer, they're gonna have like black all over their rims after a few kilometers, right? So yeah, to reach proper clamping force. Okay, that's why we're doing it. Good question, Albert. Okay, a little bit about stud pilot service. So you can see here on our stud pilot service, we have what they call a cap nut, outer cap nut. We have an inner cap nut and another inner cap nut. And this is what they would look on the outside after installed. So someone mentioned something about aluminum nuts. Who was that throwing that question out there? Was that Dennis? Okay, so basically the outer nut's the same. Obviously there'd be left-hand threads on the left side, right hand on the right side, inner and outers. But if you look at these here, so this ball seat, so this part, what you see right here, that's for a steel, okay? When you see a collar on it like this, that's for an aluminum, okay? Because the aluminum wheel's thicker. If you put this style on a steel wheel, it wouldn't seat, okay? You could, however, it's not the right, you can't, don't do it, but it would fit on an aluminum wheel. It just doesn't support enough, okay? And you might end up with broken studs. That makes sense between the two? Okay, aluminums have the collar every time. Okay, so we used to work on these all the time. So when I started in the industry in like 1999, I started with Cal Tire or something like that. Basically, there was hardly any hub pilot yet, hardly some. So we worked on stud pilot and demountable every day, all day. That was the thing. So we got really good at them because we did them so much. So sometimes what would happen is the square head would round off from, just overuse and stuff like that, or it would break like this. So you can see that, how it's broke. That's from over tightening. So a broken stud like this. So what there was if you haven't seen one before, in the orange circle here, this is a spline that you hammer on top of the threads here, and then you put your socket on it and spin it out. And then you could put it inside a vise or whatever you have to punch that back out if you need to use it for another one. Anyone seen that tool before in their store? Yeah, good, awesome, good. Then I won't stick there too long. So do you want to read the statement here, Steve? I can zoom in a little bit if you can't see it, or can you see it okay?
I can see it all right.
Okay.
If the area between the ball seat is worn to less than 1/16 of an inch, or the approximate thickness of a dime, the wheel should be removed from service.
Good. So we're looking at, let's just look at the orange arrow first here. So you can see right here, it doesn't matter if it's aluminum or steel, there's on a brand new wheel, there's a flat surface in between the ball seats. Okay, and you can see that where the orange arrow is pointing. In this system, it's not like the hub pilot. So there's hub pilot's just a flat washer against the mating surface of the wheel. In this case, it's a ball seat. So every time the nut goes in, nut goes out, it actually wears out the hole. Okay, so takes a few years, and over tightening of these assemblies, it happens faster. But when that flat surface where this orange arrow is pointing wears out to 1/16 or thickness of a dime, it's no good. There's not enough material there for that ball seat to properly seat anymore. So that's a go, no go. Okay, if it's that thin, if it's sharp, it's done. Okay, thumbs up. That makes sense. Okay, good. Okay, so a little bit about stud pilot service. So in the self-paced module, they talked a little bit about frozen cap nuts, but so quickly. So we're just going to watch this demonstration here on how to remove a frozen cap nut. That's when the inner and outer nut actually have seized together. And when you take the outer off, the inner nut comes with it.
If at any time during the removal process, an inner nut gets stuck to the outer nut, we have the inner bud nut removal tool, clamps onto the wheel itself. Because these are left-hand threads, you're going to put the gun in reverse. That holds the outer nut in place and drives the inner nut through to remove them from being stuck together.
Everyone's used one of those tools before? Good. Can you guys, like in your, whatever's going on out there in Dauphin, out the window, is there blinds or something that you can close, or if people are looking through there, can they kind of like maybe do something? I just feel like you're a bit distracted with whatever's happening outside there. Cool. Okay, so let's go into a little bit about demountable rim service. So we talked about clamps or wedges. Okay, so that's what this would be. Then we have our wheel nut, we have our wheel stud, we have our rim, right, without the wheel because the wheel's still attached, which is this 5-spoker here, still attached to the hub. Okay, so Darian, which is the heel type clamps? So if you're looking at these photos, can you tell the group here which are the heel type clamps? It was in the self-pay. Sorry?
Number 2.
Yeah, good. So number 2. So basically, there's a heel right here on the clamp. Good stuff. And that's why the heel on the clamp there. Keegan, what's what's photo 4 of? What kind of clamp?
Honestly, I'm not too sure. I don't think I've seen that one in the self-pay.
Yeah, so not very common. It showed it super quick. So it's a heel-less clamp, and that's off of a steering position. Okay, instead of a dual. So that's just off a single tire position. So Dennis, can you find the heel-less clamp photo?
Number 3.
Yeah, photo number 3. Good. So you can see here that there's no heel. Okay. And photo number 1. That was pretty rare now, photo number 1. Has anyone seen that style? Go ahead, Keegan. Where have you seen that one?
It's off of a 3 cast spoke Dayton.
Totally. And it's really hard to do, but if this would break or something, you're not actually supposed to replace them with the other style, because the wedge, how it transfers force to the components, you're supposed to replace it with another one of these. Okay, so quick little thing here. So Nathan again is going to show us just a few ways of removing that spacer because it gets seized on sometimes. And then he's going to show us, after we have a little discussion about the spacer, on how to remove and install a stud on the demountable system.
To remove the spacer band, it's as simple as using a soft metal composite hammer, tapping towards you.
Right, so I'm just going to back up just a sec here and pause it. So that'll be the easiest one likely you ever see, right? That's not real life. That's a training assembly, okay? The thing is, you do have to give it a bit of a smack like that, right? You might need to use a larger hammer, but as soon as you get a gap created like this in here, then you could use a pry bar in there. A bead axe works actually really good if you stick the duck bill flat part of the bead axe in that gap and pull on the handle. It will, kind of pry that apart. Then you turn it a little bit and you pry it some more, turn it a bit, pry it some more, until it works off all the way. Happens quite a bit that they're seized on there like that. The outer always comes off easy. So this is demountable stud removal installation.
In the event that there's a stud that has been damaged and needs to be replaced, there is a Dayton stud removal tool, and it comes with an applicator. You put the removal tool in the applicator, line it up to the stud, hammer into place. Using your ratchet wrench with the appropriate size socket, you can remove the stud, the broken stud. Inspect the hole, thread in the new stud. Using a Dayton stud installer that has a ball bearing inside there, thread the Dayton installer onto the stud. Using the air wrench with the appropriate size socket to approximately 50 foot-pounds or until the stud bottoms out into the hub.
Super common. So if we're working on the demountable system, like every other unit you work on, probably a stud's going to pull out, maybe the bolt or the nuts seized onto the stud. So then you just replace the items. If you see damage to the studs at all, because it can happen, it's really soft metal. So when they're putting on or off the duals, they'll often drag the rim on them. You can damage the studs that way. I remember in the self-paced, I'm not sure if it said it or not, but the torque on those, the spec is only 225. Okay, so there was a time where I would go to some stores and they were doing these at 285. At some stores were doing 350. Some were doing like 475, and that poor nut was like flattened out. Right, so remember it's 225. So you could actually use the small torque wrench if you wanted to. Okay, so we get to this part here. Self-paced was pretty good, so this module is not like super, there isn't so much to cover. So this is where you could ask me if you have any questions left like, in your head right now from what we've been talking about, or I'm going to do the same thing. I'll go around the room just for some key takeaways. We'll start today with Keegan. What's a takeaway you got from today?
I've never seen the Dayton steer before. I've never seen that little clip there.
Cool. Good.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
For putting the Daytons back on, is there like a Cal Tire appropriate way of like aligning them, or is it kind of just like the old school, put something against it and spin?
Yeah, that's actually like in the self-pace they showed that, so that is the industry standard on how to do it. If you want to, though, you can go into two ways you can look at this. So you can go into on YouTube and look up Cal Tire commercial. And you can see Nathan there. He does a demonstration of that, right? Or you can go into our SharePoint site and watch. You could watch the self-paced video on that process, which they make pretty complicated, but really it's just what you said there, right? It's really hard to explain for me to explain how I do it, but I'll try. So basically, here, let me back up a few. See if I can get a good picture of one here. Okay, so we got this picture right here. Let me zoom in on it. Okay, so we got this picture right here. So generally what I would do is it's all, you put the inner on, you put your spacer band on, you put the outer on, you put your clamps on. I would then thread every nut on. So the same amount, like with my hands, so I'd spin it and kind of be tapping it with my knee, actually, so there's the same amount of studs showing, and I can't turn them anymore by hand. Okay, so now I know I'm at a good place to start. Okay, so I would then take my impact gun and just ever so slightly snug this one nut up, like just hardly. Okay, and then I would hardly snug up this nut down here. Then right away I would put my hammer. That's what I usually use, right? And I'd spin it right away to see where the run out is more than the other side, where it's not straight. So let's say if I had just tightened these two, I spun it up, and over here it's kind of where it's kicking out. I would just snug that one ever so slightly, looking down at my hammer though, right? Because I should be able to, when I tighten that nut, I should see the gap form in that spot where my hammer is, and then I spin it again, right? And then I would see another point. Okay, I need to tighten that one a little bit more. Hit it with the impact gun, and then you're pretty close already, right? Usually I can get there in like just that, right? And then I would start snugging them in a star pattern, and then I would just give it a final spin. Yeah, looks good. I don't have more than, you're only supposed to have 1/16 on a steer position and 1/8 on a dual position for the amount of run out. Keep in mind if there's damage to the cast spokes at the back, if the spacer band is damaged, if the rim is bent, you're never going to get it straight. So keep that in mind, okay? And the better you clean the components before you install it, the better job you're going to have at doing that. So basically, if you tighten the nut too much right to begin with, there's no give left. So if you tighten this one and by your hammer it's saying you need to tighten this one, you can tighten that one until the stud breaks. It's not going to do anything. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Dennis, key takeaway for you.
So my biggest takeaway is actually seeing how Dayton wheels and stud pilot wheels are taken off and put back on, because I've never seen that before. So, like ever.
Oh, cool. You haven't seen them even in the automotive.
No, it's like the only similarity is the hub pilot. if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my two biggest takeaways. Also the little things as well, like the torque indicators is
Mhm.
pretty neat to see.
Albert.
Well, I'm definitely trying to brush up on my terminology, like difference between clamping force and torque. Like I know the difference, but I'm pretty well unfamiliar with the terminology. Like so, learning the technicalities and just things like that. That's I think the biggest thing I've learned today.
Cool. Good stuff. Devin.
Removal of frozen inner and outer cap nuts on the stud pilot service. I've not done that. All the stud pilot services I've had my hands in have been buttery smooth.
Yeah.
So yeah, gonna practice that when I find something gross.
Yeah. So just remember, I think right now I have a training axle in Campbell River. I think.
Yeah.
Right. So just set it up just so you have done it once. Right. Like.
Yeah.
You know, find that tool. And Albert, if you've done that before, even you could grab that tool and show Devin about.
Yeah, we got quite a selection of those things, so we'll definitely set up the scenario for them.
Sure. Yeah, sweet, good. Steve.
I guess my biggest takeaway would be have to replace the studs on a Dayton. I haven't done that before.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's nice, right? And they're actually fairly cheap. So if you see any damage, just like we should just replace them right away. Good. And Darian.
My biggest takeaway would probably be the 3-spoke cast wheel with the bigger clamp. I haven't actually seen one of those, so it's good to know what to do if it comes in.
Yeah, you know, I find them the hardest actually to straighten as well. Like when you're having to straighten it, however it's set up. And really, like I've only worked on in all my years at Cal Tire, like I bet if I said 5, it would be pushing it. And because you used to see them on like old cattle hauler trailers, and they would have like a 20-inch split rim on them. So I haven't seen one in a long time. So if you do see it, it's probably going to be on something old, because they haven't manufactured those in a long time. But at least you'll know kind of what to do if you see it. Okay, so again, next steps. So find your trained mentor for the hands-on. Tomorrow morning or tonight, do your self-pace before the class. And that's kind of it. And then we'll see you tomorrow for day 5. Day 5 is pretty long. So just this one's short today, but day 5 will be a pretty good length when we do single piece changeover. We have inflation and things like that. So enjoy your day, guys. Be safe.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, you're welcome.